Puppetry. My name is Matt Sorensen. I am a longtime Ballard family member. How's that? Can everyone hear me okay? I am currently serving as the interim technical supervisor at UConn's Puppet Arts program, but I am very happy to be here tonight as your guest moderator. So tonight we are presenting the first of our forum series of the semester, Puppetry, Ritual and Performance in Turkey, the Istanbul Biennial and Beyond. So I have a few BIMP announcements before we get moving. So the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry is happy to offer this programming for free online and in person, which is really exciting. We have some faithful fans here tonight. Thank you very much, faithful fans. Enjoying some of our tea and cookies that some of you missed from when the pandemic started. So we're back live here with the forums, which is really exciting. So please do come down. If you would like to support this event and our other workshops, forums, and performances, please make a contribution on our website, or also UConn Gives is coming soon. So pay attention to our website and our social media platforms, because UConn Gives is a 36-hour period where you can donate specifically to support the Ballard Institute or all kinds of other really wonderful programs here at UConn. So stay tuned for that. I also want to talk about some cool events that we've got coming up. This Saturday, February 25th at 11 o'clock a.m., we are presenting the Baffo Box Show by Modern Times Theater. Did I pronounce that correctly?
I think so. I don't know how to pronounce Baffo.
Baffo Box Show.
Baffo, but I think it's Baffo.
Well, it's going to be really fun and cool no matter what. So come on down this Saturday at 11 a.m.
It'll be Baffo.
Tickets for that are $12 or $10 for members and seniors, $8 for students, and kids and under are $6, and you can get tickets on our Ticket Leap page, which is linked on our website. We also have coming up our next Puppet Forum, which is going to be Wednesday, March 29th at 7 p.m. in person here at the Ballard Institute. That will be Sam and Friends, the story of Jim Henson's first television show. And our guest will be author Craig Shaman. And John Bell will be back in the moderator seat for that. Once again, that's going to be free and here, and will also be online, so we hope you can join us for that. One other exciting thing that I want to mention is we're really, really proud to announce that Feel Your Best Self just won a Kids Screen Award for Best Web Series Original, which is amazing. So if you don't know Feel Your Best Self, it's a collaboration between the UConn, Emily, can you say the
UConn Collaboratory for School and Child Health.
The UConn Collaboratory for School and Child Health. It's a collaboration with the Ballard Institute, and our very own Emily Wicks, who is writing tech tonight, is one of the co-creators. And a lot of our alum for the Puppet Arts program and current students were involved, and it's a really great project, so we hope you can check that out too.
And the competition for that award was CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company, and Peacock, which is the NBC online station. So the underdog won.
For sure.
And it's a lot of you come pick us alumni.
Congratulations. Also on exhibit here at the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry, we have Myths, Legends, and Spectacle, Masks and Puppets of Ralph Lee, which is an amazing collection of masks and puppets by Ralph Lee, who is an amazing New York-based actor, he was an actor, but a puppeteer and a mask builder, and this show features many pieces that encompass his amazing career. So we hope you can check that out. and that's open until May 18th.
And it's a beautiful exhibition. Some people have said it's the most interesting or most beautiful exhibit they've seen, and Matthew here curated and designed the exhibition. So kudos. Co-curated.
Sure. Cool. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce this evening. So we join the Ballard Institute director, John Bell, in a discussion of his puppet performance, workshop, and exhibition projects at last fall's Istanbul Biennial. In the first Ballard Institute Forum of the spring 2023 semester. I'm Matt Sorensen, your guest moderator, and I'm going to talk to Dr. Bell tonight about his work as co-director of Demons of Society, an outdoor bread and puppet theater pageant production with 55 Turkish volunteers. Very exciting. He also will talk about, he curated 2 biennial exhibitions, Annals of Object Performance, Puppetry, Street Performance, and Activism, and also Peter Schumann's bedsheet paintings. And he'll also discuss his work as a workshop leader with theater groups and children's programs in Diyarbakir, Kurdistan. Dr. Bell's talk will touch on the history of Turkey as the center of puppet and object performance from the Byzantine Empire through the Ottoman Empire to the present, and the ongoing challenges Turkish artists and performance face living and working within an authoritarian society. In case you don't know Dr. John Bell, he's a puppeteer and theater historian. He's the director of the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry and an associate professor of dramatic arts, both at the University of Connecticut. He learned puppetry as a member of the Bread and Puppet Theater Company from 1976 to 1986 and received his doctoral degree in theater history from Columbia University in 1993. He's the author of many books and articles about puppet theater and is an editor of Puppetry International. John is a founding member of the Brooklyn-based theater collective Great Small Works, one of the creators of the Honk Festival of activist street bands, and a member of the Second Line Social Aid and Pleasure Society Brass Band. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thanks to the entire audience here and at home. We're rebuilding audience for the live events. It's a pleasure to be here in the interviewee seat, and thanks, Matt, for being the interviewer moderator of this event. I was on sabbatical for the fall semester, and during which this project happened, among others. I got to visit the Southwest and look into spectacle culture there, which is awesome, and do some writing and sleeping late. I wanted to talk about our project in Istanbul, the Bread and Puppet project for the Istanbul Biennial in August and September of last year, and I want to say this with a bit of humility because I was kind of a tourist, but working with a lot of people, Turkish people in Istanbul, and trying to figure out what's going on, and not knowing, and being an American, and learning about different aspects of Turkish society. So I thought I wanted to share some images, hopefully not too many, and have a discussion with Matt and with you and the people in the interwebs world, and take it from there. There's some video clips that we wanted to show too that hopefully won't be, they're not embarrassing for me. So let's see. So we brought a pageant, a bread and puppet style pageant, to the Istanbul Biennial, which is every other year arts event, mostly exhibitions of art from different places around Asia, South Asia, East Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. And our performance project was a bit unusual. It was titled Demons of Society, and I want to get into that. But first I wanted to just talk about some aspects of Turkish culture and puppet culture. One thing I found out there in looking at a book by Metin Ant was the history of giant puppet performance in Turkey, which happened during the Ottoman Empire, as you can see with this two-faced giant puppet here in a procession with some armed soldiers. Most of these processions were in the middle of downtown Istanbul, next to the Hagia Sophia Mosque, in an area, a flat arena area. It used to be a chariot arena when the Roman Empire was there, and that's where these things took place. There were also big spectacles with fireworks, as you can see on the left, with a dragon that's a firework dragon, multi-headed dragon, and a sort of castle with fireworks shooting out, etc. And then there's the waterborne event there with some giant puppets on a raft and some more fireworks. So there's a lot of interesting spectacle. And here's another two-faced puppet in a parade with torches and musicians. So that was really interesting to learn about, to think about this history of puppet performance in Istanbul. Istanbul is the largest city in Europe, but it's not only in Europe, it's also in Asia. So we were living on the European side of Istanbul, but you can take a ferry and you're in Asia. So that was really unusual. It's a Muslim country, of course, which was new for me, and super fascinating. The Ottoman Empire lasted for a really long time. Before that, there was the Byzantine Empire. So there's hundreds, thousands of years of history, architecture, politics, culture. People were quite wonderful and very warm, so it was a wonderful event all around. I was thinking historically there was some, I want to talk a little bit about Turkish shadow theater, but in the 1970s there was a political theater for revolutionary action, that my friend Denise Bajar, who's a theater history professor in Istanbul, mentioned. She said they were somewhat inspired by bread and puppet theater, which isn't unusual for the 70s. So it was a political theater performing outdoors with amateur actors and stuff, and giant puppets, as you see here. We also connected with Cengiz Ozek, a Karagos performer, an acclaimed Karagos performer in Istanbul, who collaborated with us on the spectacle we did, performing a little coda at the end, an environmental show. And he recently sort of made his house into a kind of museum. That's Cengiz on the right with the flowered shirt, which we visited, and with beautiful puppet displays. And we took a group photo here in his museum. On the left is Claire Dolan, a puppeteer who created the Museum of Everyday Life in Glover, Vermont. Myself, Adam Cook, who's a very, very actually outstanding puppeteer, hand puppeteer, and also works as a carpenter and other things in northern Vermont. Cengiz and his partner. These are some of the puppets that Cengiz had on display, and you can see, I think they're sort of more modern versions of the traditional Karagos characters that were so much a part of Ottoman performance traditions. The exhibitions, the two exhibitions that Matt mentioned, were that I curated were in the Baron Hahn Gallery, Emin Baran was a calligrapher who studied in Germany in the 30s and came back and did modern calligraphy in Turkey, in Istanbul, and was sort of recognized as a innovative, modern artist in Istanbul. And the exhibitions took place in the building where he used to work. This is an exhibition, Annals of Object Performance, which was pieces of or examples of contemporary work that uses puppets, masks, and objects, often on the street, often in political context, just to sort of say, there's a lot of this going on, a lot of this culture around the world, people using puppets and masks in different ways. So this is a more historical section. This is an early Ku Klux Klan mask. This is a giant parading puppet that Jackson Pollock made in the 1930s when the Nazis decided to get rid of the normal laws so they could create their own laws. They had a hanging party for the German calligraphic sign for law, and they hung that. 1930s puppets, Frida Kahlo, a symbolic death of a union demonstration in the 30s. And together with those examples of historical puppets and contemporary puppets, I wanted to display some banners used in contemporary political actions, thinking of banners as a kind of type of object performance. And Alexandra Zevin, a colleague of ours at the Building Stories Collective in Gowanus, Brooklyn, who died of COVID a year and a half ago, she had made these banners parading for Breonna Taylor and Khalif Browder. We also had banners from Extinction Rebellion Boston and Look Loud. Upstairs from that was an exhibition of Peter Schumann's bedsheet paintings. He's painted over 1,000, I think, or hundreds at least of these paintings since COVID started, getting a lot of bed sheets and then painting usually one a day. Maybe he slowed down a bit. And we also installed a looped video of bread and puppet work. The Demons of Society project was done. Interrupt me. I'm just when you want to. If you want, I'm just going on. Okay. The Demons of Society project was done with this group of people, volunteers, a lot of students, puppeteers, teachers, some retired people. There was a woman who was a banker who had lost her job. And the four of us, we traveled to Istanbul with some folded banners, that woodcut and painted banners of some trees. But otherwise, we made everything there with the participants in about a week and a half, and then performed after about 2.5 weeks. The Demons of Society project was something Peter Schumann had done earlier in Tehran, Iran. I think maybe 10 years ago. And he invented this as a way to go to a place, and Iran has a repressive government, and work with people and not bring a show that says, well, this is the problem with the world, this is what's going on, but ask the people there, what are the demons of society? The demons who, he says, retard or inspire, neglect or abandon, destroy or deactivate those active forces that work on our private and communal life. So who are they? What are their names? How do they engage with us in the society we live in? So it was to cultivate people to think about what kind of challenges they face, in the form of demons, which is a very old kind of puppet character. So we first had meetings with the group of 55 people, or there were 70 people at the beginning. I think in the end, 55 people or more performed. There were so many people who wanted to be part of this that we split into morning and afternoon sessions so we could work with 35 people at a time. So we're talking about the workshop, what we're going to do. Claire Dolan here is explaining the different elements of the show, which is based on a pageant Bread and Puppet had done the previous summer in Vermont. Then we went out and got garbage from different places and cardboard. We went to some cardboard recyclers. A lot of the cardboard recyclers in Istanbul are immigrants from Syria, so there's sort of interesting contemporary political aspect to that. We also got inspired by stuff we saw around Istanbul, like the design of these waves on the wall of a park. And we walked around a lot of streets with our friend Feride Eralp, who had worked with Bread and Puppet and is a feminist activist in Istanbul who helps organize the women's marches for International Women's Day, which have been outlawed, I think, since the Taksim Square demonstrations. Kind of a fearless feminist activist, very inspiring. And then we talked about cardboard construction. We got a lot of cardboard, we bought cardboard, and here Claire had written out some of the design ideas of Sarah Peedy, who works with Ballard Institute in the fall, designing sort of fast puppet pageants, and has a book called, 68 Ways to Build Really Big Puppets, which she distributes online all around the world, and people have been using that. That here the participants are taking photos of the Sarah Peedy suggestions for puppet design, and then some examples of how to make joints and how to attach rods to cardboard, just different ways you can use corrugated cardboard in construction. Then we went to an area where the architecture students this is Bilgi University, at the sort of the tip of the Golden Horn. Architecture students the previous semester had dumped all of their projects in an area of a big parking lot. So all of us went out there and different people pulled out pieces of plastic or cardboard or wood or metal that they thought they could make into puppets. As you see here, that's like an anti-pigeon thing you put on a ledge or something. Hooray! Then we talked about the demons. What kind of demons did people want to create? And I want to show some video of that in performance. Again, being ignorant of the situation in Turkey, it was a process of learning about things. Taksim Square is a big open square next to a park, Gezi Park. The president of Turkey, Erdogan, this authoritarian figure, built this mosque after the Taksim Square demonstrations in 2013. Erdogan wanted to tear down this park, which still is there, with trees and grass, and instead build a shopping mall. There were a lot of protests, and then the protests in Taksim Square kind of grew. A lot of people joined, and the protests began to talk also about freedom of the press, freedom of expression and of assembly, and the political Islamist government's erosion of secularism. And they were repressed. 22 people were killed in the Gezi Park when the Gezi Park protests were put down, and 8,000 were injured, many critically. But that's what people would talk about. I think it was sort of like Occupy Wall Street, or more than that, the murder of George Floyd, or one of these big political events. But you talk to people and they'd say, well, since Taksim Square, like there was a thriving alternative theater scene in black box theaters not too far from this place. That's gone now. There's no more alternative theater in Istanbul because after Taksim Square, the government wouldn't allow it. So it was interesting that that was a feature of the time we spent there. These are photos of previous women's marches that our friend Feride and her feminist collective had organized. We also went out to these amazing, wonderful markets and bought fabric to build puppets. And people started making puppets and masks in really interesting ways. This woman said, I want to build a puppet representing a vagina. So she did, and we didn't know what to do with it. So you can see here people are trying out different techniques, working on the sewing machine. Here, Claire Dolan's showing giant puppet construction techniques, making a big cardboard face, which she would paper mache. And people just were very inventive with plastic pipe and whatever they had as the puppets began to take shape. Became a dictator puppet. This was a kind of giant lion puppet. Really nice masks they made. And then we started to do movement rehearsals. Also, Adam Cook had a big session making flags to use in the performances that a lot of people worked on. That's finished. Claire's giant puppet building, some different examples of, putting things together very fast, cardboard, paper mache, paint, and working with found materials. As you can see here, we made a junk orchestra with junk instruments conducted by Adam here, and then choreography based on choreography developed that summer by Steve Paxton, who was a dancer, actually more of Peter Schumann's age, who started out in the 60s in New York City and invented something with Simone Forti called contact improvisation, which is a kind of you run into somebody and then they move and you move. So unusual for Bread and Puppet, he designed some choreography for the show, and we sort of repurposed that in Istanbul. This puppet, giant dragon puppet, became the censorship puppet, and this is the big face Claire made with burlap arms and hands. There was a big boat with a cloth body. These are existing Bread and Puppet designs that we sort of brought and remade there. And then we worked with a form called Kantastory, which is picture performance with a large group of people performing a story called Courage. And I think some of the interesting aspects of Bread and I'm talking a lot, anyway. Some of the interesting aspects of Bread and Puppet texts are a bit of abstraction. So I think I have the text of this later on, but it's courage to do this, courage to do that, courage not to do that, and it's a little bit abstract, which is pretty good when you're in a place where you can't say the head of the country is bad. You can't name it. There's a certain amount of subtlety that's needed, it seems to me. We were in a very privileged position. It was an international arts festival, the purpose of which is to let people know Turkey's a big, open, wants to invite the world in. And we were Americans, coming from the U.S. And when we didn't do anything out of the ordinary, we didn't go out on the street and perform such shows. So we were privileged, and as Claire Dolan says, people appreciated this sort of safe space where they could talk about things that they were thinking about. Like right before we got there, the rainbow flag used in LGBT demonstrations was outlawed. So some of the guys in the puppet building sessions made a rainbow flag and put it on their puppet, because that was possible in our space. It ended up they didn't use it in performances we didn't ask them about it. It just ended up that way because I think it was illegal to show the rainbow flag. Like we have one hanging on the front window of our museum here. So stuff like that. This is now we're getting to the show itself. And maybe we should show the first video now, which I'm in a position to show, I think. Okay, so I think it's this one. No, it's this one. So this is a lady, I think from the BBC, who did this, and we'll see what happens. Okay, this is like 3 minutes of this video.
This parade is the work of Bread and Puppet, a well-established American puppetry company who are here from Vermont and are known for their large-scale performances that often come with a political message. The group are performing Demons of Society, a work that speaks to the urgencies of the present moment, whatever that means to you. They hope to promote social and political change. And they're working with Turkish participants who've helped design and construct the performance.
It's a much more open kind of communication, much more open kind of theater where you're presenting ideas, images, and the audience takes away whatever they will. So there's a lot of openness, and in a way it's a kind of conversation with the audience. The politics of it is kind of open. We don't feel it's our job to come to Turkey and say, well, this is what's going on, because we don't know. You know, our whole time here has been trying to learn about Turkish society and Istanbul and with these wonderful people we're working with, what they're going through, what they're facing economically and politically and socially.
This is the arms and the embrace of nature coming to be yourself and help everyone. I think that's my fanciful interpretation, and I'm allowed them because this is art. More puppets, and this time they're Turkish. Collaboration is a crucial component of the biennial, and also performing this evening is Cengiz Özek, a legend in Turkey. Cengiz has brought a modern perspective to the traditional shadow theatre Karagöz. It's a form of puppetry that goes back to the Ottoman period and requires a skilled puppeteer who can create different voices to become multiple characters.
Kukla herkesin seyredebileceği çok özgür bir sanat. Bazen konusu itibariyle sadece çocuklara hitap edebilir ama görselliği, tekniği ve naifliğiyle bütün insanların içinde bir saklı kalmış gizli çocuğu meydana çıkarabilecek enerjiye sahip. Bence herkesin aynı anda seyredebileceği çok tatlı bir sanat.
I think it's fair to say that puppetry is probably not the first thing I think of when someone mentions the arts, but watching this audience transfixed by the life given to these shadow characters, I have a newfound respect for it.
So that was a short look at that.
Very cool. John Bell on BBC, everybody. That's very cool as well. Big things happening around the Ballard Institute these days.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I thought, let's see. I wanted to explain a little bit more of the demons, because that was, for me, that was such an interesting part of it. Wait a second. What did I want to maybe I don't want to bore things too much. It started with everybody entering, as you saw in that clip, with a parade with flag runners and this boat, and then this choreography with 4 houses. The houses were represented by these poles that we painted white, and there were 4 of them, and the performers performed miming kind of choreography of everyday life gestures, you know, like looking at your iPhone or typing or doing yoga. What else did they do? In Vermont, when I was doing it, I was like splitting wood and taking wood into the stove. And then they were visited by 2 sets of 4 demons. And so I just thought I'd explain that. The first demon was called Gods and Submission. When the participants created these demons, we said, well, what's the name of the demon? And we thought they'd say, like greed or whatever, or, bad hair or something like that. But they had really long explanations of, like, God is a symbol of, the gods are a symbol of power, and then it's also about submission, about 5 other things. So this was God's submission, and the sign says surrender. There's this giant mouth here. The women who made this said, yes, we want to do this, and then we want to have a penis that's attached to it. And then when it arrives, and we said, okay, and they got some plastic bottles and put it on a lever so it goes up like that. Said, okay. They wanted to put Christmas lights in it, so it was lit, but that didn't work out. But they would come to the first house and then arrive, and the penis would raise, and it's mostly women in that house, and they would sort of look at it, and then they go, hooray! A very nice, ironic, funny thing that they invented. The second demon was fear. And the sign says, are you afraid? And it was beautiful head here and this sort of skeleton type body here that they danced with. The third demon was actually a 3-headed demon with these beautiful heads called indifference. So that was something that people thought was a demon, something to be dealt with, indifference. And then the 4th demon was duality. So it had different eyes, these that came off and could switch around, so it could have different expressions. The mouth wasn't really attached; it was held up, so it took on different appearances, and they had a sign saying yes and no. So duality, and the demons would arrive and then come to these houses and sort of threaten them, but the people in the houses pushed them away, beat them away, and they exited. So then a second group of demons came, and you can see them arriving here to the 4 houses. The first one in the second group, the 5th demon, was called surveillance and censorship, of which there's a lot. And you can see here, I think that goes through there, that's the beginning of surveillance or censorship. It was letters painted on the body of this dragon, which had a tin can, a big tin garbage can as part of the head. But it was interesting in the video that the Istanbul Biennial made, like, you can't find an image of this, and I wondered if saying censorship was on the side of a puppet was too controversial. Anyway, so I couldn't find a good image of the words surveillance, censorship. So again, it was like, well, what is your demon? Well, it's surveillance, but it's also censorship, and it's this and that. And they had, so that was that. Then the 6th demon was perfection, and the sign says, I'm beautiful. And so now I want to think it's the tyranny of trying to be beautiful, trying to be perfect. This was called capitalism, and it was kind of like it's supposed to be like an iPhone here with the pads, and the iPhone puppet would pull the ropes to which were attached these hands, and then the hands would buy it. We have a video that shows that. And the 8th demon was morality, saying be smart, and then they were chased away. There was an embrace sequence where 2 people from different houses notice each other, come together, embrace, and then the people from the 2 houses pull them apart. In the summer in Vermont in the States, it was for whatever reasons. Was it? I think it was. I was going to say it was a male and female, but maybe it was two women. But it was interesting here. They decided it would be two women, and they pulled them apart, which was very interesting because it's sort of a anti or a homophobic official culture at the moment. So that was interesting. And then the vagina puppet came out. We didn't know where to put it, and Claire said, "Let's put it right here before the big dictator puppet comes out." So she ran in and would say, "It's coming, the dictator's coming, it's coming," and run away. And we didn't identify it, so some people didn't know what that was. Then the dictator, the puppet we call the dictator, came in, and by the time it was in performance, they wrote Mr. Forbidden, Mr. Forbidden. So we didn't call it dictator, which I think would have been really problematic, or they didn't call it dictator, but Mr. Forbidden was a little bit ambiguous, and this puppet was kind of ramshackle and kept falling apart, but it was kind of okay. It confronted the people, fought with the people, won, knocked down all the houses. Then there was music. The big puppet came in, picked up all the people, and then the people actually pulled it down, which is ironic. And then there was the junk orchestra and these big banners. The only banners that we brought with us came in, and then the Courage Cantastoria was performed. It says courage, courage, naked courage, fighting courage, courage to get up out of the mud, courage to see, courage to plant what's missing, courage to destroy when necessary, courage, courage. Courage not to give up, courage to speak, courage to think, courage to rethink, courage to give up, courage to decide, courage to knock at the door, courage to knock down the door, courage to fly. And then we all flew. I got to give the flying lessons, everybody got wings, and then we practiced flying, and then we flew away. And we flew over to Cengiz Ozik's Karagos stage, and as a kind of coda to the show, he performed an excerpt from his show, The Garbage Monster, which is sort of an ecological story about not throwing garbage in the ocean, but with Karagos. So that was how the show ended. And he was okay. We didn't know how we would collaborate with him. You know, did he want to be totally connected into the structure of the show? And he was like, you know what? Y'all do your thing, then I'll do my thing, and that's cool, and that's what he wanted to do. So that was fine. It worked out. And then at the end, we passed out bread, which is a bread and puppet staple. Passing out bread. Claire made the bread in a kitchen at the university. So I thought maybe we could look at some of the video of this, if that's okay. And so this is the scene of the demons. I hope I didn't give it away too much. And okay, oh wait, do I want to go back a little bit? Okay, we're going back a little bit to the arrival of the boat. We played in 3 different places. First at the Bilgi University in that arena. 2 of them were right by water. This is a suburb of Istanbul called Küçükçekmece, which had a very popular crowd, sort of a working class crowd audience, and a lot of immigrants apparently from Syria and places like that. And it was kind of wild. Like, we came in and used this space that was along a river, a walkway, a big pedestrian way along this edge of this lake, and there were kids riding bicycles and people walking, and it's like their place. So we had to rehearse. We had a hard time getting to use the space. Okay, here we go. So this is some of the demons.
Berens.
Don't know what that was, something else. But yeah, so that was that sequence, and of course, sorry. Of course, the show ends well. There's the courage contest story, and then everyone flies, and then there was the shadow puppet show. So that was this show, Demons of Society, and then after that we spent a week in Diyarbakir in Kurdistan. It's the largest city in Kurdistan, in the eastern part of Turkey. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but...
Sure. Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions
please.
About this entire, the biennial, right? So this is organized by the Turkish government?
It's organized by a foundation sponsored by some, like many foundations, some wealthy people, and it's not part of the government, but it's, I mean, I don't know how things work in Turkish society, but I think that I think someone from the foundation was sent to prison, which was not unusual. I was just reading before tonight's event, and I'm not sure if it's the same guy. Here's my ignorance. But a manufacturer who was the supporter of many arts organizations was sent to prison, supposedly for being a terrorist. That's the accusation that is made to people who are opposed to the government. Again, I'm sort of talking about stuff I vaguely know.
Right.
So it wasn't the government.
Okay. And this foundation, they kind of organize this festival and they reach out internationally.
Yeah.
Kind of like we do when we're trying to put festivals together.
Yeah.
You curate it.
Yeah.
So what was how did they approach you? Did they reach out to Bread and Puppet?
Yeah, well, one of the curators, there's a curator from India, and a Singapore curator from Singapore, and then a woman, Utameta Bauer, who is a curator who lives in Singapore, but is originally from Germany. And when I had a fellowship at MIT in Cambridge, she was the head of this program of art, culture, and technology. So I knew her then, and I think she really liked Bread and Puppet, so she called us up and said, hey, do you want to do a project in Istanbul? So I think it was from that connection I had. She had invited Bread and Puppet to perform at MIT when I was there as well. So Utameta Bauer. You know, the range of exhibitions was super interesting. There was a whole installation, a project with poets. Poetry is a really huge thing in Turkey. In one of the first workshops we did at Bilgi University, there's a guy who runs a coffee shop, and after we did an outdoor rehearsal, he sent over a poem. He wrote a poem about seeing this workshop, and that gave it to us. So like poetry is very important. There were other sort of interesting quasi-activist exhibitions there. It wasn't just paintings on a wall.
And in terms of the participants of this workshop,
Yeah.
it looked like you had all ages, and there might have been a fair amount of students and
Yeah.
community members.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, who has time during the day to go do a project like this? So it was a lot of students, and as I mentioned, there was a woman, a banker who had lost her job. There were some puppeteers, some retired people. But when looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, it's a lot of young people, and a lot of women mostly. So.
I wanted to ask you, the puppeteers that you worked with, did they have a background in this type of political presentation, or are they more like traditionalist Karagos performers, or other things?
That's really interesting, and again, my grasp of Turkish puppetry is not so strong. The Karagos tradition, like a lot of traditions, puppet traditions, is, it doesn't function the way it used to. There used to be coffee houses. You'd go to a coffee house and drink coffee and watch a shadow show, and especially during Ramadan, in the night after you break the fast. But that doesn't really happen. There's a lot of coffee shops or tea shops, and people are drinking tea all the time, but not Katago. So, like with Cengiz Ozic, I think he's kind of unusual because he has to reinvent that. A lot of people were doing sort of Muppet-style puppets that we worked with, and different types of puppetry, object performance, not mostly oversized puppets. And I think you can't do political theater there really openly. Or, Cengiz's show was about ecology, so it was activist in that sense. Again, that's sort of my rough grasp of it. So I think this was new techniques, especially the cardboard, fast-making stuff.
Very interesting. I want to take this moment to remind everyone who's watching us, either in-house here or also at home, that we would love for you to have some questions to share with, with the collective, and Dr. Bell will be happy to answer them for you. Great. Do we have any questions in the house? Hi, Paul.
Hi. I have a question about, I don't remember his name, but the Karagos puppeteer.
Cengiz Ozic.
Yeah, and you were alluding a little bit to this, but like I've learned from you that Karagos, the traditional Karagos, was a lot about political commentary,
Yeah.
and et cetera. But I may have misunderstood the video, but it seemed like he had sort of reinvented the tradition into more of a softer kind of family entertainment. Am I understanding that correctly? And did you get a chance to talk to him about that?
Can we rephrase that so people at home can hear that?
Paul's asking if the Cengiz Ozic work we saw was different from traditional Karagos, which engaged routinely with political satire and political critique, if his version was a little tamer, I think was the word you used. And I would say yes. I mean, in part because I don't think you could be openly critical of the powers that be now. And also, I don't know, I think the idea that puppet theater is for kids has grown in the 20th century, and it used to be for adults mostly. So it's a little bit safer, I would say, and yet I think he, with the ecological theme, he wants, it's a way for him to get at some of that social critique. So yeah, I think it's complicated with what, like our friend Rahul here comes from working in Kerala with shadow puppet traditions, and we know traditional shadow puppet theater in India too is facing challenges in the light of the 21st century.
Thanks.
Okay, so maybe I'll talk about Diyarbakir, which we took a plane to the east, and Diyarbakir is this mostly a Kurdish city, and here we are on a bridge over the Tigris River. Again, it's a culture that's many thousands of years old. I think the original inhabitants of the city of Diyarbakir were there, like, I don't know how many thousand years ago, 3,000 years ago. So it's that context that's very, very old is for, coming from the States, that's really impressive. So, and here we are on the Tigris River, like the Tigris River, what? That's the Tigris River. And this is Claire Dolan and Feride Adam and Savaş Isik from a group called Mordem Theater, which is a theater company and a cultural center where we worked with actors. They are also having like tango classes and various workshops. The context for this that we realized was that there had been two mayors of Diyarbakir who were Kurdish, and then the Turkish government, there's conflict between Kurds and the Turkish government, deposed them and sentenced both of them to life imprisonment. So they were in prison for life for being the Kurdish mayors of the city, and a lot of their support of Kurdish culture also collapsed. And a lot of the organizations, Kurdish organizations that were part of the city, became independent and supported by NGOs. So there's a lot of police presence and roadblocks and very strong visual presence of, not all the time, but of the powers that be. Diyarbakir was a center of metalworking, and we saw, some outdoor, wonderful markets, I think in a lot of the Middle East, beautiful markets, and people were forging. This is interesting for Paul Spirito, who does blacksmithing, for making these tools here. And the metalwork from Diyarbakir adorns the tomb of the Persian poet Rumi in Iran. And Rumi is like one of the most important poets of Iran. And so the fact that the metal from this place was over in Iran was very important. Some people told me that, like, oh yeah. Also, metal from Diyarbakir was used in the automaton of Ibn al-Jazari in Baghdad in the 13th century. So we worked with Mordem Theater, doing workshops with these paintings, kind of sort of contest stories. We just split up and improvised stuff with the paintings that we had brought with us. Did the Courage contest story again. Did some cardboard, simple puppet making workshops that Adam led, as you see here. Just making samples of different types of puppets you can make with cardboard. Claire made another giant head with cardboard and paper mache. And then I worked on making some giant bird puppets based on a bread and puppet design of a flying bird that we ended up doing out in the street. We also met with this Colorful Hopes Association in the downtown, the old city of Diyarbakir, which is all tiny streets and stone. The stone comes from volcanic rock, which is it's all the sort of grayish rock. And this is a center, they call it a non-governmental organization that aims to carry out rights-based activities in order to ensure equal opportunities for children living in disadvantaged neighborhoods at risk and exposed to discrimination. There had been complicated politics of the place. There had been the Kurdish soldiers had come to Diyarbakir and fought the Turkish army, and as a result, when they were put down, the Turkish army destroyed half of the old city, razed it, and built modern houses with roads between them, streets between them that were wide enough for tanks to come by, because the old streets of the city were, not very wide at all. So this is one of the organizations that became an NGO. They put out a report to the European Union about being a child in Shurichi, which is the neighborhood, because the kids experienced trauma of being in the middle of this war zone. So they're dealing with kids suffering trauma. So one of the things they did was a lending library for toys for the kids in those neighborhoods. And this is the woman who, for some reason I don't have her name, who ran this center, who is just an amazing, strong woman. And we did a puppet workshop with the kids, making hand puppets, as you can see, and playing with them. We also saw a performance of a tradition called dengbej, and dengbej is an old sort of epic storytelling tradition that's sort of sung in these long stanzas. So it's an oral tradition. I couldn't imitate it, but we went to a center for Dengbej, and he sang a long story. It's very interesting because this is another form that's many thousands of years old, right? So you're sort of like in the presence of this very old tradition that's impressive. There's a lot of repetition, some unusual oral sounds. It's sort of mesmerizing to listen to it, and you think, well, this is the way that poetry was sung and passed on, and it's epic stories. So Savage, the guy from Morden Theater, said, because Dengbej influences their theater work, he and his brother. Savage means peace, and his brother's name means war. So their names were War and Peace, which apparently was not unusual. But he was saying that there's some stories, there's some Dengbej traditions, or one Dengbej story is like a fourth story from the Oresteia. So the Oresteia is this Greek trilogy, very famous Greek trilogy of 3 tragedies. But he said, well, there's a fourth story in that. And the fourth story of the Oresteia is told in the Dengbej tradition. It's never been written down, or maybe it has by now. But it's that old, that it was around at the time that Greek tragedies were being written. So there's that sense of intense culture. I think maybe like Native American folks in the U.S. have a sense of, culture of the particular tribes and stuff. But that it was very interesting to hear that music and to meet people who had this very deep sense of, in the case of Kurdish people, their own culture and the way that it's transmitted. So that's an image right there. That's the end of my images. I wanted to say that after we got back to the U.S., there was a bomb exploded near that Taksim Square on a big pedestrian walkway, and some people were killed. And the Turkish government blamed it on the Kurdish people, and then there was a big crackdown on Kurdish people. I think our friends in Istanbul did not believe that the Kurdish terrorists set off this bomb, so that happened. And then during the earthquakes, there was some big apartment buildings in Diyarbakir collapsed. The damage wasn't as much as in Syria and other parts of Turkey, but those were things that happened afterwards. And these sort of like the wonderful people we met are still there, and surviving. I thought I had some thoughts about life in an authoritarian society. I'm talking so much, which made me think, stuff that sort of came up for me. I would mention that many people you met talked about how life is very different since the repression of the Taksim Square protests in 2013. That because that was 10 years ago, or 9 years ago when we were there last fall, and say, how's it going? What's going on? They say, well, since Taksim, blah 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 blah, you can't do this, you can't do that, or things have changed and there aren't opportunities. Many people wanted to leave. They say, well, I'm going to go to Western Europe. I want to emigrate to North America. I want to go to the States. Or one of the guys in the cafe said, well, my she's a doctor. She's in England, and I'm going to go join her there. And that was unusual. I don't think I've been here in the States. I haven't, I don't run into people who say, well, actually, I'm planning to leave. Like, when Trump was elected, people said, oh, I'm leaving. But but that didn't happen really. But this was like, actually, I want to leave and never come back. So I felt like, well, that's pretty serious. Things have got to be pretty tough for that to happen. There was also a lot of visible police presence on that big pedestrian area where near Taksim Square. There were big armored personnel carriers and police with vests and machine guns, kind of like you sometimes see at airports in the States. So our friend Feride said an area that used to be a site of protests against the government on that big pedestrian street. That's where there was one of these big armored personnel carriers and police or soldiers with submachine guns. So the visible police presence, like letting you know what was going on. And another thing, this woman Feride, our friend Feride Eralp, this feminist organizer, whose marches are now prohibited, and the rainbow flag is outlawed. Like, we were there, and at one point she said, yeah, my mother was banned from teaching last week, sort of, offhand almost. And her mother is an anthropologist who taught at this sort of more liberal university in Istanbul, and then had retired, but then she was still teaching as an adjunct, I guess. And she had signed a petition with like 400 other academics in support of refugees from Syria. And because of that, they banned her from teaching. So that was just stuff that happens, that happens. People going to jail for life, people being banned from teaching, all sort of this environment. So my sense of it, again, being ignorant and a white middle class guy from the States looking around, I don't know, but some of this was sort of trying to figure out, what is this like? It's what's going on here? Trying to figure that out and having a sense of how things were different there than in the States, especially in terms of what people might be able to do or feel they can do. So.
Great.
Thank you.
Most of my follow-up questions were about, how that last chunk played into your entire experience. But I feel like it would be fair for me to throw some questions out to the audience. Do we have anybody online that has some questions, Emily?
We do. Carol says she came in a little bit late, so you might have answered this, but I don't think you did. In the oral language, singing perhaps, or even vocalization, or the epic stories that is part of these performances, in a standard Turkish or Kurmanji, or in some dialects, is the oral language. Let me see, I'm trying to see how that's... is it in a standard Turkish language or dialect? Were there any foreign words, such as in English, that may have made an appearance? Did anyone speak about language diversity or the politics of language as it relates to the puppetry performances?
I feel really ignorant about that. In the show we did, the Demons of Society show, it was mostly in Turkish. I don't think there was any Kurdish, there were any Kurdish words there. I think the Kurdish language, like I think in Diyarbakir, is repressed, kind of like the way in Vermont and French, and in Connecticut, French used to be, when the French Canadians who lived in Vermont and Connecticut, you weren't supposed to speak French. I think there's that sort of language repression. So I think in Demons of Society, it was in Turkish. In Diyarbakir, I think they spoke Kurdish all the time, and in Dengbej, I'm not sure what language that was. I think our friend Savaş knew the language. I'm not sure if it was an older form of Kurdish or what. So I don't have a good answer. I'm not smart enough to know that.
Did any foreign words make it in at all?
I don't know. In our show, I don't know. I assumed it was all Turkish, but I'm not sure. And I think if there were foreign words, I think that would have been notable. Like, it would have been, oh, that's a different language. I don't know how many different languages are spoken in Turkey, so there's my vast ignorance.
Anybody in house have any questions for Dr. Bell? Anthony.
What was the audience's reaction to seeing this bread and puppet work that was developed in Turkey?
They were very, very enthusiastic. I think part of it is that not many people are doing big outdoor spectacles in public spaces, and spectacles that get at sort of social and maybe political ideas. So for one reason or another. So I think it was like, what is this? This is very unusual. And, we were Americans, so that's sort of exotic. And we're working with all these really energetic young Turkish people. I think also just the happiness of being outdoors at a big open theater performance in these 3 different spaces was really celebratory. So there's a lot of outdoor performance. In Küçükçekmece, we worked with a band, a Turkish brass band, Bando Show, that mostly plays at weddings. And we saw some weddings, outdoor weddings, and around the corner from where we stayed, there had been a wedding, and the wedding party came out on the street, and the band played, and everybody danced. And that was the kind of music that this Bando Show played in a parade we did. So there's a lot of street life and street performance, but I think the giant show that we did was rather unusual. So it was very welcome and appreciated.
If I could, I'd like to follow up on Anthony's question. I'm curious if, bread and puppet is a lot of times the narrative isn't as forward as Western audiences are used to, and sometimes that creates a barrier to the audience. And I'm wondering if you found that the Turkish audience was a little more open to having the narrative, subtle narrative like there is in that style of performance.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure there's always a barrier, but I think I hear what you're saying. There wasn't much of a narrative in the sense that the only texts that were in the show, like in the beginning when the boat arrived, they were singing "Row, row, row your boat," because we were thinking, okay, what is that? What do we sing? And then during the demon scenes, there were, they did a Turkish version of "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo," and there were these slogans written on signs or the wings of Mr. Forbidden. But there wasn't like a narrative where there's this character and that character and they talk, that kind of thing. The only consistent text was the courage story, in fact, that we looked at, and that's a little ambiguous. It's about courage, but it doesn't, in my mind, it's a little obscure, or it's something that you can interpret the way you want to, or they interpret the way that seems to make sense to you. And then it ends with this idea of courage to fly, and then everybody flies, and that's very positive and nice, I think. So I think people were very responsive to it, and it seemed to me, again, with great ignorance, that the sort of play with ideas about, censorship or Mr. Forbidden or what were the other gods, perfection, morality. Those are sort of interesting ideas, and we weren't saying, well, this is what's going on, and this is what morality is. So there's that ambiguity, I think, was appreciated by the audience. Yeah, that's my sense of it.
That's pretty fascinating. Tom?
I was just going to ask a question about the sponsorship. Was there any sign of like explicit state sponsorship of the arts? Like we've heard a bit about these NGOs and different richer donors, but is there also like a thriving state-sponsored art scene, or?
I'm ignorant. I think there must be. I don't know. This one foundation that supports the biennial, they also support like a jazz festival and maybe a theater festival and another festival and this and that. I don't know about government support for the arts, how that works. I don't know. I know there's like pop concerts, but those might very well be private. So sorry for my ignorance.
In terms of the participants in the workshops that you were doing, were they, I mean, when you describe the authoritarian government, it makes me think like danger a little bit. So was there an undercurrent of what you were doing was a little bit potentially dangerous?
Well, no, in the sense that, we were working in this university, which was kind of a protected space. Okay. There weren't police at the university, When we did these parades before before the start of the show, and then Kachukchik measure, we paraded along this esplanade by the lake, but we weren't like out in the street, like on 4th Street and Broadway in New York or in front of the stock exchange. It was none of that, and I think to me it was pretty clear whether that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't allowed, and if we had done something like that, I think it would not have been good. So I think we were in a protected space, and my friend Claire, who was very largely responsible for directing everything, she said, as I said earlier, she, in her opinion, we were in a sort of safe space, and that was part of what people appreciated. That they could create these things, the woman could make that, could make a vagina puppet, and we were like, okay, sure. Yeah. Or they made the rainbow flag, and we were like, okay, sure. So that was this limited space, which was kind of valuable because of that. That's my sense of it.
Is it kind of like the theory that puppets can get away with doing a little bit more than what a human can do?
I think so, yeah. Like if we had been an acting thing, maybe it would have been a dance piece, and we did have dance. Maybe you could do a dance piece that was a little vague, but and I'm not sure what a play, a drama text play would have been like. What would you do? Sometimes I feel like with drama you end up being a lot more specific about your ideas.
Rahul, you had your hand up?
Yeah. So adding to the Paul's question, I understand as in your presentation, in the prosceniums and all, initial presentations, I can see the masculinity of the tradition in the processions. So there was no portrayals of woman in anywhere, even the images which were the spectators also, there was no portrayal of woman. So, but the politics of the demands of the society, there was a real portrayal of feminist perspectives from different ways, through different images. So I was wondering, how does that narrative reach to the audience? Well, was there any kinds of, how does that, is there any prohibitions in the traditions, in the traditional theaters for feminists, for women? How does that work?
I think that's a really smart and interesting question, and Yeah. Well, I was saying that, like the leaders in my mind. I mean, I was there, like tall white guy, and Adam was there. Claire, in my mind, was very much the dynamic center of our work there with our colleague Feride, who was this very strong activist person, very clear and strong. And there were mostly women in the project, and so there was a lot of initiative from women. I don't know how the audience saw it, if they saw it as a feminist kind of show. I mean, to my mind, it was. The puppet. What was it? Submission with the penis puppet. Making fun of male. Characters like that was very funny. So yeah, when you said the figures in the procession were mostly male, I hadn't thought of that. At the head of the procession, which I think you saw in some of the video, Claire was in this white dress on stilts doing a flag dance. So that was the first thing you saw, was this very tall woman on stilts waving a flag. So I hadn't thought about the gender dynamics of the show the way you described it, and that I think some of the gender of the puppets something like the beasts and stuff. I don't know if how people thought of the gender of those, but to me I could easily have said to have reflected a sort of feminist perspective. And how that fits into Turkish culture, I'm not sure. What struck me about, like in Diyarbakir or with most of the people we met from the Istanbul Biennial were women who were organizing it all, and then our friend Feride. So, I don't know how that works with the larger politics of Turkish culture. Vast ignorance on my part.
Can I ask maybe a softball question? What surprised you the most about your time there?
What surprised me the most about the time there? I don't know. It's an Islamic society. We have rehearsals, and then Erdogan builds a lot of mosques all around the neighborhoods. And Feride was saying when there's a neighborhood where there's like a cultural group that Erdogan doesn't like, they'll turn up the volume on the call to prayer. Every, like I said, 5 times a day, there'd be a loudspeaker with a recorded call to prayer. That would happen while we were rehearsing, and we'd be out there moving the puppets and stuff. And you can see in some of the photos, you can see the minarets of the mosques, and you first hear one, then another, then another, then another, and there's this, actually, kind of beautiful sound, but, and I sort of thought, oh, we don't want to insult anyone, and there were some women wearing headscarves and stuff, or hijab, in the workshop, which is interesting. So we were like, oh, should we stop, and not, pause? But they didn't stop at all, they were. And this woman, one of the women who made the puppet with the penis that went up and down, she was saying she grew up, and I don't know what her religious perspective is, and she was saying like that she always felt odd about that because the call to prayer is in Arabic. It's not in Turkish, so it was in a different language. And so that was sort of disaffecting to her. But people didn't stop. They weren't apparently religious in that way, from what I could see. So being in an Islamic society was different for me. Not so much a surprise, but like, okay, I think I had been in Algeria many, many, many years ago. I mean, I had been in Algeria and Morocco many, many, many years ago. So it was interesting to sort of see how that works. I really, we loved being there. I mean, I would love to go there again. If, you know, I'm sort of talking about it being authoritarian society, but like the people are so fantastic, and you know, when you'd hear something like Dengbej, it was so startling. Like, oh my God, this is, what am I hearing? This is this thousands-year-old culture, you know, right here that I can experience. That was very powerful. So it was a little bit confusing in that way, because I think we all really liked being there and trying to figure it out. The food was really good.
Were there other international groups that you had a chance to witness what they were doing, or work with them, or collaborate?
No, not so much. We met some of the other artists who were doing installations. Like there was a group from Africa that had an installation with a lot of different texts by different people, like Negritude, sort of Black consciousness movement folks. There was a group from Indonesia that was celebrating a kind of poet and spiritual leader who had invented a kind of more open form of Islam, and they had like a rock and roll band that was playing. There was like a free radio group from Turkey. This was all in the Sparenhan Gallery. So there was a group from India that worked with textile workers. There was a textile factory where there had been a fire and many people died, and there was a big exhibition about that fire. I think it was a lot of women textile workers who had died. So there were a lot of sort of, I think, sort of socially conscious art projects from these interesting artists, mostly from Asia. So we didn't see too many Americans there. There was an interesting woman from Germany who was doing a project about sounds, or sounds that can't be recorded. See, I'm not describing it well, but describing sounds that are unusual. That sounds really lame when I'm saying. But anyway, yeah.
Did you get to meet with Chenze and discuss puppetry?
A little bit. He's a professional puppeteer, very successful, sort of like, I don't know, I think he wasn't wary of us. I think he knew Bread and Puppet, but he wasn't like ready to say, yeah, let's go out and make political theater, like you guys do. He's a very refined puppeteer, which is great, and his work, you could sort of see that is really, really well done. So we talked a little bit, and he was very, he would set up, he was very sort of self-contained. Like we would set up, and then he would come with his partner, and they'd set up, and the way he wanted to go about it was, you guys do your thing, and then I'll do my thing, and that'll be cool. So that, which was great. And it was really cool for us, because for us, we all loved Katagos. I don't know if everybody knows Katagos. We were like, Katagos? Yeah, totally. We want to work with the Katagos performer, because we're like, Katagos, that's the bomb, And so we were, and the type of theater we were doing totally allowed for, okay, yeah, we can insert that. We were ready to insert the Katagos show in the middle of whatever we did, but it seemed like he was like, and that's okay, I'll come at the end there, and it'll be fine. And we're like, okay, that's cool, we'll all fly over in our wings and sit down and watch the Katagos show. So, yeah, that was a really wonderful collaboration, and I think for Turkish people too, it was interesting because, here's these Americans, and they're connecting to this old tradition. Like we weren't like seeking out the modern puppeteers to do their work with us. We really liked that it was the really old Ottoman Empire era work that worked.
And you mentioned that he's really visible. He's quite a well-known puppeteer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He hosts a Shadow Theatre Festival in Istanbul every year and travels in Europe a lot and in Asia.
Great. So I think we have time for about one more question, and then we will have Dr. Bell give us a summation. Anybody in the house or anybody online have a question? I thought I saw a hand up. There you go. Thank you.
What's next for traveling for Dr. John Bell, and do you have any similar projects on the horizon?
I don't know. I work with this group, Great Small Works, and we've been doing a show about mycelium, like fungi, that we have these big backpack puppets that are like giant puffballs that shoot out balloons for spores. So we've been doing that in a few different places. We want to do that more. My wife Trudy and I have been doing a toy theater show called We Love Trees, which is sort of with these two wonderful musicians in Somerville, Massachusetts. And it's about a big tree about trees and why it's good not to cut down trees and what trees do, and which seems like a good subject. So we're going to do that in the spring at Mayo Street Arts Center and I think at Sandglass Theater. And I don't know, we're hoping that this project we did at UConn, that's a Greek tragedy, The Persians, might go to maybe, I don't know, colleges or art centers, because we liked doing that. So I don't know. Going to work at the Ballard Institute and do awesome stuff with Emily Wicks. That's the goal.
Very exciting.
And talented people, talented students.
All of you.
Like Anthony, all of you. Rahul. We want to do we're going to do Rahul's going to curate an exhibition of shadow puppets from India, so that'll be extremely exciting.
Great. Well, thank you, John Bell, very much, and thank you all very much for being here tonight. Again, this Saturday at 11 a.m., we have the Bafo Box Show. I apologize, Justin, for mispronouncing it. We also have some really great items out in our exhibition space for you to check out, the Masks and Puppets of Ralph Lee. Join us for more future programming. You can check it out on our website, and also check out Feel Your Best Self, because it's awesome. Thank you all so much.